So basically, for organizational accounting, we've seen growing awareness of the extra financial aspects, standards and criteria. So it's quite recent now. The thinking process is not recent, dating back from 1960s, but it's only been 3 years really that there is a growing strategic awareness focusing on these ecological accounting systems for and with businesses. This meeting will be recorded, says the technical voice. I would like to review two major reports. First, the Nota-Sénat report, which is connected with the Collège des Bernardins, because a large part of the thinking of the Nota-Sénat report, which basically was an introduction to the French PAC law, which was adopted in 2019, i.e. how to think the 21st century businesses. Part of the contents of the Nota-Sénat report originates in the thinking process and research programs conducted by the Collège des Bernardins. So as part of this report, there's a part on accounting, and basically, the report states, and I quote, any understanding of a business goes through its accounting systems, social and environmental challenges and stakes are not considered in the accounting systems currently used. And what's most important is that the accounting systems will not give a true and fair view of the business practices. So, meaning that the stakeholders of a business cannot take enlightened, well-documented decisions based on this. And this does not only include sustainability aspect. They are talking about general types of decisions, key commercial business decisions for the life of the company. This is the first observation. The second observation is that accounting is not neutral, and the technicality of accounting standards should not hide the fact that accounting systems can be political in terms of choice of society, in terms of influence of political actors, and behind the facade of neutrality and technicality, basically what is hidden is a number of choices which are conveyed without the stakeholders being aware of that. So they are challengers and stakes for the accounting systems to understand and to make people understand that using technicality, accounting standards reveal a reality and causes players to do, actors to do things which they are not aware of. And the way accounting systems are structured and choices which derive from the accounting systems are not neutral, are not incidental, and they predetermine the way businesses represent the reality in which it operates and its role and part in it. So these are the two main issues, basically, I'll be addressing. Another official report, so the Nota-Sénat report was commissioned by 4 French ministerial agencies, and then there's a European report, which is a report on sustainable finance. So since 2018, the European Union has been passing very interesting bodies of law to try and codify and regulate sustainable finance using a number of so-called platforms, legal platforms or accounting platforms. The current, so there was a platform on taxonomy of sustainable activities. This new platform is on sustainable accounting. And so this report is a so-called introductory report on financing a sustainable European economy, which is showed here up on the screen. So it is important to better consider ecological aspects in accounting standards. Better consideration of sustainability issues in accounting standards is critical, quote unquote. And doing this will make it possible for stakeholders like investors, banks and lenders to make relevant decisions, that is enlightened, well-documented decisions, referring back to the Nota Sana report, and the goal which is expressed by this report, commissioned by the European Union, is to achieve integrating financial and non-financial stakes and challenges, to have a true linkage, to have a true intersection or interchange of these two sets of challenges and stakes. So ecological accounting is today taken up at the institutional level and is the subject of much debate and more intense discussions in France, in Europe, in the international arena, giving rise to thinking and debates on internal standards and standardization and so on and so forth. Now, looking at what's happening in academia on these aspects, what can be observed is that first, there are very few mobilized normative approaches or standards-based approaches. Very often, academic work on ecological accounting will be analysis work or critical analysis work, but will not give rise to tangible, concrete proposals of modeling, i.e. normative views and visions, which would contribute to the debate and thinking process and be used by the field practitioners. This is point number one. Now, point number two is that there's little research on change in accounting standards for the balance sheet and the profit and loss account. This is much sidelined in the thinking process. You have lots of work on the business management accounting, on extra financial reporting, on KPIs, and so on and so forth. But specific work on the balance sheet and on the profit and loss account is insufficient, has been insufficient, and not developed enough. Another point in academic literature is that most of the time when there are proposals of a linkage between financial and extra financial systems, these are based on values, and valuation, even though there is a historical trend of thought on sustainable costs. And the last point, and this is what you see in academic literature, generally speaking, social and environmental accounting is addressed under the angle of legitimacy or stakeholder theory. So, in other words, social and environmental accounting is addressed as a component which should vindicate a given business model without impacting the said business model, or only impacting it marginally. And this is something which you find in the field. This goes beyond academia. Basically, social and environmental accounting is very often grasped and understood not to cause a change in the accounting standards, but to show and vindicate what has been done and to show that it has been done appropriately, to provide some added value or to focus on added value. And we'll come back to that. Basically, generating or providing legitimacy of the activities of businesses to show that they are doing things well. So we've been talking about accounting. We've been talking a lot about accounting in this research program. Now, what's behind this notion of accounting? I would like to take the opportunity to review the key roles and functions when we talk about and discuss the notion of accounting, especially when we discuss these stakes and challenges as I have just reviewed them. So basically, when you use the notion of accounting, you cover four key features or functions which are critical when you take an interest in accounting ecology. Basically, you cannot address accounting ecology without looking at these four key functions and the change and intersection of these four functions. The first, which is the first anthropological and historical standard, when accounting first emerged in Mesopotamia at the very start of human civilization, is the notion of taking account, of modeling the world, of taking the world into account in which your organizational structure operates. So this notion gave rise to the notion of account, quote unquote, being unit of basic information, giving rise to modern information on materiality, that is the relevance of information, and taking into account is a question of representing what's relevant, how to discuss what's relevant, and how you identify what needs to be tracked and monitored over time. This is function number one. Function number two, by order of importance, is to provide accountability, being accountable. And in the Anglo-American world, you have the notion of accountability, quote unquote, which has given rise to much research. So accountability basically means that to show that you are responsible for, accountable for your actions. And you have a clear reference of this in law. And very often you review the accounting traces of what has been done. So there is a challenge and an issue of identifying who owes what to whom. Then you have the notion of counting. This is notion number three of function of feature number three. As de Rosière said, counting is first a notion of agreeing on a convention, then quantifying. So counting is never objective. There's never an objective notion, even though in the last years there are attempts to make believe that numbers can be objective. It is not the case. Numbers are always conventional, and you have treaties dating back from the Middle Ages which discuss these notions of the figure or the number. So figures or numbers in accounting always have to be challenged as to how they've been built, how they've been constructed, and what are the conventions and agreement backing it. And the last feature, point number 4, is accounting for, and the way you communicate information will favor this or that stakeholder. If you favor investor relations, then employees will not necessarily understand this information. So there are issues connected with governance mechanisms. The way you structure accounting standards will make it possible for some stakeholders in the business operations to take the lead, to be favored, to be given preference in the way the company is governed. So we'll be addressing these 4 key functions, analyzing them, reviewing them, and tracking them. So as I said, accounting is truly the structural language for a business, and it builds upon political choices and goes much above and beyond computational techniques, with the shareholders being given preference in reporting and accounting. So to end this introductory presentation of what accounting is about, and to point at where we are heading to, identifying where we are coming from and where we are heading to. The question which may be asked is, why did accounting emerge? What accounting was used in the history of humanity, of having accounting systems and using them. Now, based on and against these 4 functions, work in accounting anthropology has showed that it wasn't half incidental that the first accounting systems emerged with the first human civilization. That is, when cities got built, when people got sedentarized, when farming and animal raising emerged. This was the first time in the history of humanity, that there was a need for organizing complex, multiple stakeholders, forms of collaboration and cooperation above and beyond family, tribes, or clans. And this type of management went beyond the basic mnesic capabilities of individuals, and they were forced to implement systems which were at the scale, at the level of a society, of a community, of a group of people, which had to coordinate to manage a herd of animals, to manage a field, to manage a city or a town. So this basically pushed for accounting system to be created so that these forms of cooperation and collaboration could be possible. So in the Sumerian civilization, you saw the creation of accounting systems emerge, as well as law, which made it possible to make the city operate, as well as language. Not writing yet, but these were institutions making it possible for these forms of cooperation and collaboration. Just to remember that the emergence of accounting, anthropologically and historically, were for reasons of cooperation and collaboration. The questions we're asking today is that in the face of environmental crisis, there's the need for renewing this questioning on these forms and types of cooperation and collaboration across human beings and with non-humans as well. So hence it is important to query, to challenge the way non-financial aspects are incorporated into accounting standards, going through all these questions, forms and types of new cooperation, challenging the forms of representation for creating sustainable businesses, challenging and reviewing the types of metrics and values which have to be used and how to build them up, addressing the types of privileged players or stakeholders in the companies, in the businesses and economies, and what regimes of accountability and responsibility should be organized and structured against all these sustainability issues. So in passing, accounting, fully ecological accounting cannot be summarized by this exercise, which is reporting. Quote unquote. Well, literally or by essence, reporting is not accounting. When we speak about reporting, the very word, in fact, misses the issues of accountability. So reporting doesn't convey at all, in essence, any aspect of being accountable for something or accounting for something. So reporting, quote unquote, basically lists a set of indicators, more or less well organized. It's reporting, literally speaking, of a list of items and things, and you don't have any basic thinking on the items making the substance of accounting.
Maintenant, si je reviens sur...
Now, to get back to a more limited issue about our current societies, to go past the main anthropological questions, let's focus on our societies today. We'll see what we can show, and this will create a link. We'll see what's the link between financial and non-financial. We could look at it in the following way. Here you have a very schematic diagram of the business world as it exists in our modern contemporary societies. And accounting is the beginning of everything, and this is something that's often forgotten in sustainable finance, that accounting is really the basis for all of it. Accounting makes it possible to structure all sorts of internal management. There's also accounting as the interface between the business and the society, which sets a framework that's used for accounting management. Here you see documents that are produced, balance sheets, P&L statements, and that show the company's situation as a whole. And this allows us to understand how the company works, its business plan, its business model, etc. And here we come to the notion of performance. And a performance analysis or financial analysis is an analysis of accounting documents. It's not a stratospheric analysis of the business. It's an analysis of accounting documents. So it structures performance or performances, because there are several different types of performance. Performances are structured by analyzing accounting documents. And so everything that revolves around governance, and governance is basically value creation and distribution of this value, and this all constitutes the the basis of the company as such. And this value is created from an accounting on an accounting basis. Accounting this helps us understand this value creation. Now, when we look at business balances, business performances, we see certain grades or rankings that are provided to stakeholders to set a framework for their participation. Today, when we go out of financial data, we get into the non-financial. This is what's happening now. Extra-financial data is really on the periphery. It does not change the business's standard economic model. So we create extra-financial accounting procedures, which may be legal obligations, as is the case for large companies in Europe. But this non-financial reporting has no impact on the core business of the company. This non-financial recording is not standardized, it's not structured. Businesses have enormous leeway, and so it really does not change the company's business. The basic aspiration is to include non-financial information, and this is the desire of the European Union. The EU wants to advance in sustainable finance. The EU understands that accounting has to be restructured from the beginning to incorporate non-financial items from the beginning so as to properly structure performance on stable and standardized, publicly standardized frameworks. So we have really integrative finance with the combination of financial and non-financial elements. The problem we face, you have the first layer, which is just to understand these issues, accounting issues, and to understand why this incorporation, this integrative nature is necessary. This first phase is not easy to understand and to incorporate on the ground. The second phase is even more complex, harder to understand and to incorporate. What I just said is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. The fact of incorporating different information is not going to bring about automatically a fundamental change in business. This is an essential point that we generally do not pay attention to. We often hear that just making accounting a bit greener would make it better, but that is not true. What I'm going to try to show is that moving ahead with the integrative accounts and greener accountability can, in fact, lead to less sustainability. So making accounting greener can lead to adverse consequences. And this is a central issue which is not sufficiently understood today. So I'd like to mention a few controversies. Now, this is not all of them, just a selection that will show the fundamental need. The fundamental need in all of our social and economic debates. We want to go beyond technical presentation of accounting models to understand these controversies and to understand the choices that must be made and the consequences of these choices. The first controversy, which is making waves internationally, and this is a good thing. We'll call this double materiality, outside in versus inside out. Now, what does this mean? We have here a first way to understand incorporation of outside elements into accounting. So the outside in, this is the diagram on top. In this case, accounting is simply there to take in external factors as positive and negative aspects of the outside environment on the company. The positive impacts are business opportunities, negative impacts are risks. So by definition, business risks, things that can have a negative impact on the company's business model, cash flow, etc. This is the outside-in vision. The relevance of information is based on the impact of outside aspects on the interior of the business. This is simple materiality, single materiality, meaning that it's the information is seen only in one direction. This leads to another vision that shows the impacts of the business on the environment. Once again, the positive and negative impacts. Here we arrive at an inside-out vision. So the internal aspects have an impact on external aspects. So here we have double materiality. Double materiality in that we don't just see the impact of the outside in, but we see how the business impacts the outside world as well. Now, this is, of course, very oversimplified. The European Union is moving ahead on double materiality, saying that accounting has to be on this basis with a very specific definition of double materiality. But in the English-speaking world, especially in North America, a few non-financial reporting systems, like the Big Four, for example, are based on single materiality, the diagram on top. We don't tend to talk about this much in the news, but at the same time, it has a significant political and civic impact. So we have this, we see this North American vision that's more or less imposed on the world, but this is changing slowly. To illustrate these issues, I like to quote the Financial Markets Authority. who says that the single materiality approach is based only on value creation, whereas the socio-environmental vision, so the inside-out vision, aims to report on the external impact of the company and the preservation of its economic system. So the position of the French Financial Markets Authority is the outside-in approach, systematically when we are looking at how non-financial aspects contribute to value creation in the short, medium, and long term. So whenever the basic issue is value creation, the vision used is outside in. And for double materiality and the inside out vision, we have to incorporate aspects of socio-economic preservation. And this echoes what Clément Fégat will talk about later, ecosystem-centered accounting. Another fundamental controversy is the issue of environmental objectives and whether our reasoning is based on stock or flows. Once again, this is a pure accounting structure, reasoning. Accounting has long understood that managing an organization being a company or a government, you have to manage a situation at a given moment, and you have to manage flows over a period, and you cannot separate the two. And it's impossible to manage an organization simply by managing a current state or flows separately. So we have to understand how flows correspond to changes in the state, the situation at a given moment. And it's the same vision, be it corporate accounting or governmental accounting. However, unfortunately, we don't generally take into account non-financial information in this structure. But if we look at the environmental world, we see that managing an ecosystem requires a system that combines both given states and flows. And when we link these two types of management, we have what we call baseline shifting, which was put forward by Daniel Pauly, who is specialized in fisheries. He has a TED talk about baseline shifting, where he basically says that if at a given moment there is no system that allows you to know exactly what are the states, the proper states of the ecosystem, then you gradually forget, you lose sight of your of the basis on which you're working. And this is true even for scientists. This is what Pauly shows, that without even realizing it, you'll see ecosystems growing poorer. And this is true also in financial accounting, that we see gradual deterioration of situations without realizing it. So here we see a strong convergence between a historic accounting concept and an ecological concept to show that any accounting system has to combine these two aspects, states and flows. The best example would be climate change. today, almost all non-financial reporting systems working on climate change report only on flows, so greenhouse gas emissions. And the question of the stock or the state is we completely lose sight of it. So we have these accounting systems that focus only on flows but do not consider current states. So if we were to have an accounting system that can really take account of climate change, it would have to be able to calculate the current situation at a given moment of climate change. And this could go by any number of evaluations. So to design an accounting system that's suited to the climate situation, we cannot simply look at greenhouse gas flows and carbon offsetting, for example. We need to see the states as well. Now, another controversy that adds to all of the others that we've seen before is the issue of capital. Now, more and more we talk about triple capital accounting. This has been around for many years. It comes from the triple bottom line accounting from the 1970s. So financial capital, human capital, and natural capital. So we come to the notion of integrating financial capital into non-financial accounting. This has been a way to operationalize sustainable development. In the late 1990s, after the Brundtland report, and then the David Pierce report, is a sort of the operating arm of the Brundtland report. It shows this capital-based approach to sustainable development. This system has been summarized as developing non-financial capital. Now, what does this mean? It means everything and it means nothing, because the basic issue is, what is capital? And open an economics book and try to find the definition of capital. You'll probably not find a definition. And this is a serious problem. Capital is one of the most common words in economics, and yet it's almost never defined. So we're going to try to expand to non-financial accounting, a concept that we don't really understand. So this is the basic question. What are we talking about? What is capital?
En fait, on va aller surtout sur des travaux d'économistes.
We go into economy works, and we have a vision when we go back in history, coming back to the 17th century. We come back to the founders of the modern economy, physiocrats and so on, which are going to conduct the whole genealogy of economists who founded modern economy. And we get the impression that it stops here. So capital would be a notion from the 17th century, but it's not the case. In fact, it's a notion that goes well beyond 17th century. It emerged antiquity. And this expression comes from Latin expression, capitalis pars, capital head, and it refers to the capital part of a monetary debt, and I insist on those two terms, which means capital on a historical viewpoint is legal, administrative, and not economical. So it corresponds to this idea that when you lend some money, when you borrow some money, you have to reimburse it. And capital is opposed to any added element. So what we call interest is disconnected from the word capital. And the word capital is done in order to have this disconnection. So capital is a debt, a monetary debt, disconnected from the profit benefits. And so it's not any productive money, even if it's loans to enterprises. Capital is never considered as a productivity item. So that's a little bit disturbing. And in fact, we notice that until at the end of the Middle Age, capital is only money. For instance, soil or field, this is not considered as a capital. Second, there is no reference to a notion of productivity, even if some loans can be productive. Third, capital is disconnected from any profit, any interest, increasing the value of the initial loan, and this is supposed to be reimbursed as it is. So that was the case in the Middle Age. For reasons of anthropological modification, and this is what's going to lead to modernity. This is a switching from Middle Age to modernity. We're going to have an evolution, the semantic shift of the word capital, and that's very interesting. At the end of Middle Age, in the 13th century, in Italian merchants, we see that in contracts, there's going to be a semantic shift, and this shift is going to lead to another vision of the capital. And that's going to be gradually set up. This vision of capital is going to refer to any productive thing. So capital, the word capital, is going to be synonymous of every productive things. And that's in connection with the cosmological evolution of society that's going to lead to modernity. So we're going to have two opposed visions. Capital, for the first, according to the first vision, capital is the monetary debt, and in the second vision, capital is synonymous of any productive thing. And those two visions are going to coexist, but in accountability, in accounting, what's going to pervade for a very long time is the first vision, whereas in economists are going to come up with a modern economy. And when we talk about capitalism, this is based on the second definition of capital, so every productive thing. And this raises to an outstanding confusion. So we end up having two models. Model one, this is the historical vision of capital that is still going on until today, and capital number two, vision number two, that is enriching every economic thinking, and that's capital as productive things. So if you say a machine is a capital, that's what we can easily hear in economy. So it refers to model 2. It has nothing to do with model 1. And second, a machine is not capital in traditional accounting. And so now, what are the consequences of those two models? Because I have to link all that with the extra financial aspect. So what does it mean, those two visions of capital? So it leads to two different visions of accounting systems. And as I said, traditional accounting is based on Model 1, and Model 2 is rather an economic vision. But at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, it's going to impact more and more the economy. And this is going to lead to the rise of the financialization of accounting, and it's going to lead to a new way of devise accounting. So this is Model 1, and this is how accounting works and how companies work. So you have debt to be reimbursed, and you have many stakeholders playing a role here. You have the banks, and you have suppliers, and the company has to reimburse the debt. And there is no difference between bank input and stockholders. So there is no difference between who brings what. So this is the viewpoint of the company, and the company acknowledges the fact that it has debt toward stakeholders. So the liability is a structuration of who brings capital and what has been brought to the company. So this capital is made available. So we separate the debt and what's available for the activity. And what's available, it's the money that's going to be on the company account. So this is an asset. And then, based on this available capital, the company is going to be able to buy machines, raw materials, so it's going to use this accessible capital. And we realize that assets in the company constitute employment for the capital. The real asset behind the machine is how we use the machine. So it's the purchase of the machine. It's so true that in France we have to come up with tables, use and resources. So in fact we're going to have a chain of usages. So that's why you have arrows symbolizing the capital flow, nourishing the whole production chain, and we end up with a finished product. For instance, a washing machine, what classical accounting system is going to acknowledge is that behind the washing machine we have a little part of debt. So one shouldn't forget about that. So we got some money in order to purchase this washing machine, and this washing machine is going to be put on the market, and so there's a little part of debt coming out of the company, and since we put this machine on the market, we're going to be able to generate a cell creating new resources. These new resources, their primary function, and that's what's very important, the primary function of these new resources, what is it? It's to guarantee the reimbursement of the capital now or later. And that's the main function of a cell. So this is what we call covering charges, which means being able to reimburse directly or in long term the capital that has been introduced to the company. So this is how to understand this business system based on the classical accounting system. So now, if we consider Model 2, you have accounting system offering a new vision, and if we want to be very precise, it emerges very early as Renaissance, but it's very minor. It's going to get more and more important in the 70s, and this is going to concomitant with the rising power of the economy. So here the capital is a whole set of productive sets. So capital is a container, is an empty box. So it's a set of productive things containing productive things. And productive things in that case is assets. It's not capital usage. In fact, the roles between capital and assets is reversed. So capital mainly is asset are productive things, and capital accounts only for the stock of the company owners. So we have productive things feeding the capital and creating value for capital. Capital depends on the company activity. If you have an activity that makes you generate more value thanks to the usage of your assets, you're going to increase the value of your capital. So here, this is a system that favors the owner's stocks, and it's a system which is such that capital depends on the activity. And when we switch to extra financial aspect, the main difference, the consideration of extra financial items is based on Model 2. So this is based on the following basis, saying that we start from capital as an empty box, and that's going to be filled with productive things. And what we're going to say is that nature, humans, are going to be new supports to productivity and to the value generated by the capital. So when we talk about human capital, we don't talk about the complexity of human beings. We talk about knowledge, allowing to improve, and which induce a risk as for capital productivity. So here we're not going to talk about an ecosystem in its complexity, but we're going to talk about ecosystemic services allowing productivity for the stockholder, and which is going to increase even more capital of the company. So beside the philosophical view of the world representation, but accounting is already that. We could say if it works, if it leads to things in connection with a good ecological management. Okay, that's what I want to reach, and that's what I'm talking about the impact on this viewpoint. So the analysis of controversies is the analysis of consequences, and we have to mobilize bioeconomy. So here we have had results since the 70s showing mathematically that when we use Model 2, leading to an environment management, considering human and nature as productivity sources. The idea is if I gain a lot, I lose in productivity in the long term. So the idea is to optimize management to see what I gain in terms of productivity. But this is not compatible, and that's what shows the bioeconomy model. This is not compatible with the requirements of a scientific ecology. The paper of Clark shows that can't hear. On a un problème. Tout brouillé. Il y a des gens qui parlent en même temps.
Des gens qui laissent leur micro ouvert.
Tu peux prendre?
Pas dans les détails. Conduit
Externalities which systematically lead to having management which exceeds the resilience of ecosystems. So you have an accumulation of such results which should lead to systematically stopping or putting an end to this view, to this vision, but this has not been the case. Once again, in the debates on non-financial accounting, which puts forward these types of modeling, you don't have conferences, you don't have any stakeholders able to own up to this vision. Now, to end, and this will bring me to the CARE framework, when you're in such a situation, what can be done is the question. This when the CARE framework came into perspective. Conducting this analysis might lead you to another way, which wouldn't be Model 2, but which would make it possible to link up the historical, conventional accounting view based on advances being monetary debt, capital as monetary debt, and a principle which could be a sustainable principle, which would mean that sustainability would be based on requirements of conservation of ecosystems. Couldn't we link up both notions and say, after all, as accounting has always been organized around advances and debts as part of the operating cycle, with accounting being the guarantors of the reimbursement of debt and how capital was employed and deteriorated. On the other side, ecology, the interpreters apologizes, but there is noise on the platform. The interpreter can't hear anymore. Interpreter apologizes. There are people speaking on the platform, interfering with the voice of the speaker. So this is work which has been done around the CARE platform. This has formed a very large community of research with participation in lots of national and international debates. To give you just a few examples, and this can't be exhaustive, with respect to research, the ecological accounting chair has been unifying research work on the CARE framework. You have research programs also being led with Carrefour, with Fleury Michon, with the city of Grenoble, and so on and so forth. And I can't be exhaustive in the reference I'm making. And with respect to it did field experiments above and beyond research. We have an initiative involving 10 businesses in the PACA region in France, which was work jointly conducted with the French Environmental Agency as well as a number of NGOs. So covering a number of things which will unify some professional stakeholders, including NGOs and many other stakeholders which are interested in this work. Speaking about the CARE framework, it's not so much CARE as a model, but it's more CARE as a theory, basically saying that there are other ways to interpret accounting, to interpret the business model based on the ecological debt and the conservation of ecosystems in a good, appropriate appropriate state and condition. I won't go into the detail of this model. I'm just putting forward the basic principles, and then I will turn over to Clément Féguère. If I were to summarize the key items and aspects on the CARE framework, well, CARE basically can be used to provide comprehensive accounting, integrated accounting with a change and impact on the balance sheet and the profit and loss account, which will have an impact on the cost accounting systems, overhauling the currently used accounting systems and standards. The principle is to consider that human and non-human entities are to be considered as liabilities, a debt, basically advances that are to be paid back. When you operate an ecosystem, you are supposed to pay back, to reimburse this ecosystem. The first type of performance to be reviewed and analyzed is solvency, that is the ability to pay back debt. So performance, which will be assessed on an integrational level, will be assessed based on solvency. So a profitable and insolvent company, ecologically speaking, will not be construed as a company operating appropriately. And as a direct consequence of all this, the assessment of capital will be done based on the cost of conservation. So you have an opposition of assessment based on value, referring back to Model 2, and assessment based on cost, which refers back to Rob Gray's work, which structured the notion of stranded cost. And you take up this sustainability principle, which are the cost of conservation, which will be used to assess capital in the sense of the CARE framework. So CARE frameworks gives a bottom line after deriving all the notions and principles and calculations of the cost of conservation, cost of capital. So in order to link up with what Clément Féguère will be presenting, the nodal points above and beyond the integration of the capital in the business model and the fact that business models are to be structured using the CARE model. The issue is how to define the issues and challenges of conservation of ecosystems in order to use CARE and to structure these ecological debts as a principle to be used in CARE. To do so, there's a need to do work above and beyond businesses and companies. This is what I want to highlight. The CARE framework pushes people to go into a thinking process which goes above and beyond the businesses. We'll be focusing on capital entities to be conserved, to be protected, to be preserved, to think about how to protect this capital at the scale, at the level of their ecosystems, that is in the middle of the environments in which they operate. So this will lead us to use this approach and map out capital entities to be preserved, which will be reinscribed in their ecosystem. So the question will be how to structure this new organization around how we define capital, around how we protect the ecological bottom line with stakeholders interacting on and across ecosystems, and how all this is to be structured. Well, this is the ecosystem-centered type of accounting which Clément Féguère will be presenting to us in a few minutes. Thank you for your attention.